Welcome to the Pro Design Builder podcast, the show where professionals and entrepreneurs share their strategies, stories, and secrets to building a thriving business and a successful life. I'm Sam, your host, as we dive deep into the world of life experiences and entrepreneurship. Before we get going, just want to thank our sponsors for today, the Pro Design Builder, which is a coaching and consulting firm for real estate investors who want to build spec homes and multifamily units. The Pro Design Builder, it's not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design. Also, I want to thank our other sponsor, the Nest Collab is a community for real estate investors who want to do more deals together. We're located in Tampa and also South Florida. We have a community on Facebook if you want to get in contact with us. We have professionals in multi different areas. So you're not alone if you're looking to do more real estate transactions at the Nest Collab. Also, foster care is near and dear to my heart. The mission is never over. As you know, I've had a number of kids through my home. I've adopted 2 kids I'm currently fostering now. And if you ever feel led to give, there'll be a link in the description to give to our foster care initiative. Some of the things that we support is a strong family. So if we could get them an additional date night, we truly feel strongly about that. Also, we purchase beds for foster and adoptive parents. Anytime that there's a transition, there's a requirement for bedding. We want to be able to provide something like that. Lastly, we provide additional meals to foster families. I know I have benefited from this quite a few times, but anytime that you don't have to prepare a meal for a family of 6 is a true blessing, and you can focus on the family. So without further ado, just wanted to introduce our guest, Tristian Smith, which wrote the memoir Against All Odds. This episode is especially special to me because it's in line with the mission work with foster care. So I wanted to bring Tristian on today because he brings a different level of perspective. So just wanted to say thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege and an honor to be here, to be able to share my story and provide another perspective on the foster care system and being able to provide a way forward in making and improving the foster care system.
For sure. No, for sure. If you don't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, what you got going on, what are you doing now?
So I'm a former foster youth. I spent 10 years in the foster care system. I am a Fort Valley State University graduate student, Fort Valley State graduate student. Well, I graduated from Fort Valley State University, excuse me. I'm currently a Johns Hopkins graduate student. I'm a retired Army officer and published author, like you mentioned earlier, where I talk about my lived experience in the foster care system and how we can improve the odds of foster youth once they age out of the system, and making that transition into adulthood and finding ways to help them be successful during that transition. A couple of other things. I am also a CASA here in Nebraska, as well as a member of the Foster Care Review Board here. So I'm part of 2 very important organizations that dedicate time to working with foster youth.
No, for sure. You're definitely have your feet firm, on the ground when it comes to anything foster related, because you can obviously you have lived experiences, right? A lot of lived experiences that people may have never encountered. I remember I was talking to somebody not that long ago, and I was just spitting out a couple stories on how I got, involved in the foster care system and why that's so important. And I just remember the response I got. There's been a few different responses, right? Which is telling. One response I got, which was, why would you do something like that? I've gotten that twice. Right. And then another response I got was, wow, I must be living under a rock because I don't know anything about situations like this. I've never seen or encountered anything like that that would cause someone to be here, you know? So I truly feel like when you're able to tell your story on how things happen, it really kind of opens the door to this perspective that people may never receive.
Yeah. So the longer I'm in this space where I'm interacting with other former foster youth, um, I can honestly say that um, the the lived experience is one that we need um, when it comes to policy making, when it comes to um, showing current foster youth what you can accomplish, um, and just overall showing the overall resilience. There's no better example than a foster youth who has aged out of the system and found success as an adult.
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
no better example of resilience and overcoming obstacles.
No, no, for sure. I mean, I wasn't in foster care, but I grew up around, foster group home kids, and I lived in the environment. So it really gives me perspective that allows me to relate to, all sorts of different people. So I'm prepared to kind of dive into, some of your stories. So, what were you like as a kid? And then, what were there early signs of your path today?
So as a kid, I would have to say um, I would have to say anger was something I used as a shield. It's something I mention a lot in my book. Um, just from watching my mother die at the age of 7, um, being abused and tortured as a kid, and then obviously being put in a foster care system at age 8. Um, I don't really think of my childhood as a very happy childhood. Um, I was constantly getting into fights. I was constantly getting kicked out of school. Uh, and so it was a very tumultuous childhood, to say the least. Um, Now, to answer your second question, if you had asked me at 13, 14 years old if I saw myself being where I'm at now, I'd have looked at you like you were crazy. Um, having served my country as a military officer, having written a book, working on my second master's degree. No, absolutely not. I would have never dreamt of any of this, not in my wildest dreams. So it just shows you the growth that can happen over a period of time. And I credit it to the people who invested time and patience in me, and just an overall the maturity that I went through.
No, no, for sure. And you touched on a few things that, resonated with me. You said you use anger as a shield. And then this kind of just brought me back a little bit too. I mean, for the longest time, for the longest time, as a kid in the environment that I was in, I had like explosive anger. And, explosive anger was a positive thing, right? It actually kept you safe, right? Because if you didn't have it, you would be met with even more challenges. So similar to you, I got in a ton of fights, and when it comes to anger now, I don't allow anybody to to have that level of control over me now. But so it in a way it helped me, with my self control as an adult. because I'm not going to allow someone to have a level of control where they could turn me on or turn me off, right? So that was kind of how I grew from my anger issues. But how would you say you grew from your anger issues?
I think at a certain point you mature and you realize that anger, displaying anger in the wrong ways can land you in one of two places, either dead
Correct.
or in jail.
Correct.
Um, because a 10-second decision made out of anger can cost you your freedom, or it can
Correct.
cost you your life, and we see that every day in our
Correct.
country.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being situationally aware of the direction I was heading, having good mentors in my life, having a few good foster parents. I didn't have a lot of great foster parents, but the few that took the time to pull me to the side and say, "Hey, there are better ways to deal with, to handle and manage your anger." That's what turned me around.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's something that actually I see as a foster dad quite often, right? And it has to do with obviously maturity and also self regulation, right? When you experience trauma very early on, it becomes harder for them to regulate themselves, their emotions, right? So we see it quite often, because especially since we take the younger kids, right, they don't know how to process things that they've seen or things they experienced, so it comes out in their behavior, later, and through time with nurturing and being consistent and having and being present, and consistent, these things do get better. I'm happy that you were able to grow in that way. And it also explained too, you could lose your safety, because I've seen that as well. I mean, lose your freedom. I've seen that as well. So who would you say was your biggest influence growing up?
My biggest influence. So, I watched a lot of Kobe Bryant growing up when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And while, yes, he was a great basketball player, I watched how hard he worked to become that great basketball player. He didn't
Correct.
just enter the league and was was given the reins to a team, and he was just a superstar off the rip. He had to earn his minutes. He came off the bench, and eventually blossomed into the Hall of Fame player that we know of him today. And so I kind of model my work ethic after that type of mentality that he had. I want to, if I decide to set a goal, if I decide to work on something, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, I understand that I have 168 hours in a week. How can I get the most out of that 168 hours in a week? I'm very detail oriented, especially when it comes to things like my diet. So watching him as a kid, I think it just had an impact on me as a kid, watching someone that young work that hard, and it made me work kind of hard as a teenager as well. And then it kind of translated into my adulthood.
No, for sure. I mean, I'm a massive Kobe fan. I remember for the longest time, I was like tapping my cousin, like, watch Kobe, like you don't understand his mindset, his work ethic. And then I forget what interview that he was doing, but he had said he came in the league wanting to be the best basketball player ever to do it. And relationships have to suffer. Quite a few things have to suffer for that to happen. And his, Mamba mentality is something that, I share with the kids.
Yeah,
Right,
right.
constantly growing, constantly looking to get better, constantly feeding yourself so you can grow. So I'm happy that this growth gene, this growth muscle is definitely in you, because that's what it requires to come from a number of challenges and to kind of be where you're at now. So
Yeah.
so um so let's dive in a little bit deeper, right? So you said around I forget the exact timeline, but 8 years old, your mom, 7 years old, your mom died, and then at
Yeah.
8. All right, so walk us through the circumstances around that.
So, excuse me. So, my mom had a massive heart attack at the age of 42 years old. I was 7 years old. My mom had dealt with health issues her entire life. She was uh, significantly overweight. She had high blood pressure. She had asthma. She had all of these health issues, and it just culminated in her having a heart attack very, very young. She died. I want to say she collapsed and died in our apartment, and they tried to revive her at the hospital and was never able to do so. So from there, we went to live with our grandmother for a couple of months until our aunt and uncle got custody of me and my younger brother. And then for the next year, it's basically us being abused, neglected, and tortured in every way possible. They didn't like sexually abuse us, but when it came to physical, mental, racially abuse, we were obviously, I'm biracial. My mom's side of the family is Caucasian. So there was this whole mistreatment because we had Black in us.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would treat their kids that were white very differently than how they treated me and my younger brother. And it begged the question, why did y'all even take us in if y'all were going to treat us like this?
Yeah, I know it sounds just like that. So I know we had a chance to kind of catch up on the phone, and you were kind of telling me some of the treatment and the instances, and I think this is although challenging for you to kind of relive some of this stuff, but it's good for people to hear, to kind of bring you into their world, so to speak, and bring them into your world. So kind of tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
Rephrase that question again.
What was those experiences like for you? Or tell us
Oh,
a
you're
couple.
talking about like going through the abuse.
Yes, yeah. With your
For instance, we would be forced to stand in a corner behind our backs for 8 to 9 hours a day. If it was during the summer, we would be forced to stand in a corner of the fence outside in the backyard. When this is in Georgia at the time, and in Georgia it can get triple digits easily. And so we're standing in the corner in the fence of our backyard fence for 7 to 8 hours. And we get like a little jug of water like this for the entire day. Now we're literally about to die of heat exhaustion.
Correct.
I remember one night after I'd gotten in trouble at school, our uncle woke us up in the middle of the night, put us in his car, and then took us to this lake. It was like a lake or some body of water in the middle of the woods. and he threw us in this lake. Like he literally chunked us in this body of water, and he got in his car and drove off and left us there for like 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So mind you, I'm like 8 years old. My little brother's 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he did that to intimidate us into not getting in trouble at school. And so how we ended up in foster care was I had gotten in trouble at school. My uncle was trying to spank me, and he ended up hitting me in the eye with the belt buckle. Now my eye is like completely like blistered up and blackened. Yep. And the pupil of my eye is like bloodshot red. Mm-hmm. And he tells me, don't go to school the next day. So I sneak on the bus anyways the next morning, and I go to my teacher, and my teacher grabs my face. She looks at me, and we go straight to the principal's office. Mm-hmm. From there, they call the resource officer in there, and then the principal comes in. He asked me if I have any other bruises on my body, and I said, yes, I do. So they had me remove my clothes, and my body's literally covered in bruises.
Oh, wow.
Of every shape, color, size. And then my little brother, he just turned 33 years old. And so he has a 1-inch gash on his head from where our uncle tried to drown him in the bathtub. And during the struggle, my little brother hit his head on the corner of the bathtub, and he busted his head and almost bled to death.
Oh, wow.
So he still has that scar from almost 30 years ago. So I want to say about a week or two later, Child Protective Services came and got us, and we were in the foster care system from there.
Did anything? Thank you for sharing that. And anytime I hear this sort of pain or sort of experience, my heart definitely goes out to you and to anybody that ever experiences some of those things that you're describing. So did anything end up happening to him? What ended up happening to him once you guys got removed from foster care?
From what I understand, he did not serve 1 second in jail.
That's sad, and that's also very unfortunate, and that also seems to be a pattern in the foster care system. And I'll share this with you. I tell you how I got into foster care. My 8th grade girlfriend, she told me that her stepdad was molesting her. I told her to say something, she did, and then that kind of started her journey through foster care, right? And I just remember thinking for years and years and years that I helped send this guy to jail, right? But it was a few years later, I was catching up with her, and then I asked her what ended up happening to him in this instance. She was like, DCF dropped the ball, and nothing ever happened to him. He didn't spend one day, in jail.
And see, that's where we got to start holding them responsible for not making sure that these individuals spend the rest of their lives in jail.
Correct.
Because these people shouldn't be walking free. Like, my uncle should not have been able to die a free man. Like, he died a relatively young guy. He died, I think, from cancer. Mm-hmm. But he should have died in prison.
Yeah.
For what he did to me, my younger brother. And as a teenager, like, a lot of my anger was aimed towards him. And I had thoughts of wanting to go and find him and take his life. Like, those are honestly some of the thoughts that I had. I could have written a chapter in my book on, my thoughts on that guy. My aunt, she played a part in the abuse too. Like she was definitely very abusive, but it was more of him than her.
Yeah.
But both of them should have, served time in prison for what they did to us.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out, and obviously this is probably something you thought about because you've dealt with this situation. How are situations like this falling through the crack where these people are not held accountable, and also DCF is also not held accountable for pursuing these people that create lifelong trauma in people's lives?
I think we have to ask the judicial system and the prosecutors. Like, why aren't these people being prosecuted? Why do we feel like these people aren't important enough? Or why do the better question is, why do they feel like we aren't important enough for for the people who abused us and neglected us to be prosecuted? Are we not that important? So that's the way I look at it.
No, that is, very, very, yeah. I mean, I think naturally when you are put in a position of foster care, you are one of the groups of people that have the smallest voice, so to speak, right? And I think that's kind of the pattern on how and why your voice doesn't get heard or reverberated, how we should. And that's kind of why I also started, podcasting as well. There's a lot of situations and stories that you get to kind of highlight and to put a voice to, and put a name to a voice in a story that people may not even be aware of, right? And it's important to kind of hear sometimes the I call it Swiss cheese in the system, right? Because if we don't highlight the Swiss cheese, it'll never improve, right? And um, I'm using my voice to kind of highlight a lot of the Swiss cheese as well, in hopes that one day there'll be a significant change. If it's up to me, I'll do my part, right? I'll take kids in, I'll father them, I'll teach them the life lessons. I'll teach them how to grow and to have self-control and all these things I've had to kind of walk myself through time, and do a lot of mental exercise. And they may not have it or be strong enough, right? So how would you say, how are you able to be this headstrong to recover from these type of experiences?
At a certain point, I had to realize that if I wanted to be successful, I had to drop the victim mentality. That's what it came down to. Bad things happen to good people. Everyone goes through adversity in their life. I went through some very unfortunate things as a kid, but at a certain point, you have to get over that trauma. You have to grow from it. You have to learn from it. And you have to, in order to be successful, you have to move on from that trauma. The people that can't move on from their trauma are the ones that stay stagnant in life. I chose to take my adversity and use it as a catalyst for success rather than using it as a crutch for failure and excuses.
No, absolutely.
And so that's what I tell foster kids. We can sit and make excuses for why, we aren't where we're supposed to be. But at the end of the day, it's our life. My motto is life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose to respond by, going to college, graduating, going and serving my country as an Army officer, developing myself as a leader, going to get my master's degree. I'm working on my second because I want to be an example to, the foster youth that are going through and enduring the challenges that I went through already. I don't want to be someone that I don't want to be another what if story. So, rather than sit and cry and throw a pity party about the adversity I went through, why not go and do something and use that adversity to do something great with it?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. It becomes a strength. So I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm constantly, reading different books. And in my last chapter, because I count them as chapters, this is what I got from it. Life happens for you, not to you. And
Exactly.
This reframing of the situations that happen into your life and looking at it from the lens of why did this happen for me, right? And what lessons could I learn from these experiences, even some of the most challenging ones that sometimes come up every once in a while, for me with my wife, and I was telling her, I was like, I still don't understand why this particular thing happened. She was like, well, maybe it's just to thicken you up. Now I'm blubber skinned because the reality is living it was far harder than talking about it, right? And with being able to talk about it and getting this sense of freedom, and then also it humanizes your human experience, right? And not a lot of people are able to get this level of freedom and clarity. So make sure that I drop this nugget again. Life happens for you, not to you. So that victim mentality that Tristian was talking about is what's not needed, especially when you go through trauma.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. So they get you out of that home, right? So they finally, now you're dropped into foster care. How old are you around this time?
I'm still 8 years old.
Are you
So I
still
was
8?
with,
So this kind of happened in a short window.
yeah. So I had just turned 7 when my mom died. So
Okay.
my mom died in March of 1996. I moved in with my aunt and uncle in probably May of 1996. And then in May of 97, I was placed in foster care.
Mm-hmm.
So between my mom dying and me being placed in foster care was probably about 15 months.
Okay. All right. And then, okay. All right. So were you and your brother placed together? What was that situation like? Initially.
Yeah. And then we continued to fight, and like we would fight like bad. And a lot of it, I would say all of it was my fault. I would pick fights with him.
Mm-hmm.
I was a horrible older brother. Like, and I'll admit this. I'll admit this. I was a terrible older brother. And so eventually they decided that after probably our second foster home, that it was best if they split us up.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up doing better.
Okay. All right. Now walk me through your foster home experiences. Obviously the good ones, and also the bad ones. There's also lessons to learn from, everywhere in between. So kind of walk me through that.
So the good ones, so in my book, I mentioned that I spent time in nearly 30 foster homes. But I mentioned 3 homes that Yeah, I mentioned 3 homes that I consider great, where I had a great experience. So those homes that I consider great, they had a great family environment. They made me feel like part of the family. You know, they weren't those people that anytime I needed something, they went to my caseworker to ask for it. Like, they spent it out of their own money, because that's just who they were. If they saw I needed clothes, we were going that weekend to go grab clothes. We weren't waiting on DFACs to send us money. You know, if we went on a family trip, I was going with them. They took me on every outing. If we went out to eat, they paid for me to go out to eat with them. So, you know, I was part of the family. Now, the not so good families, as I mentioned in my book, you know, I felt like a stranger in a home. You know, like, I didn't feel comfortable. And oftentimes I could walk into a foster home and within 10 minutes I could tell you whether or not, like, nah, I'm not
The
staying
energy
here.
is good if it's gonna work.
I'm not gonna be here that long, because I was gonna do whatever it took to get kicked out of here.
Get out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. I know one foster home, like, I didn't even have a pillow to sleep on. Like, you had to display good behavior for like a week in order to get a pillow to sleep on.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was wild.
That's
like,
wild.
Thinking about it now as an adult.
Yeah.
And then there was one home where the lady would just curse. She would just curse at us. Like, she would just drop F-bombs for no reason at us. And so to get kicked out of her home, I started abusing her cat. Like, I'm like, I have a dog right now and I love animals to this day. But as a kid, like, that cat was her weak spot. And as soon as she saw me kick her cat, I was out of there. And I couldn't have been more happier.
Yeah, exactly. You think it made you more clearly you're very aware, you know, of your surrounding, right? You would say that it heightened your awareness, you know, to things that people. Yep.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. So how were you as a student in school during all of these transitions?
So along with the nearly 30 foster homes that I was in, I attended 13 different schools. So I went to 6 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, and 2 high schools. The reason because of that was because of the different movements. When you move to a different foster home, 9 times out of 10, you're changing schools. However, I considered in elementary school, I was considered, you know, one of the best and brightest students in my school, you know, no matter where I went. I could go integrate into a new school and understand whatever the teacher was talking about. Now, my behavior, on the other hand, was something to be desired. I was always getting in fights, getting in arguments with students. And that's where that's where trouble happened for me at school. Academics. So I had the opportunity to skip a grade. I think it was 4th grade. And so they took me to this place to get tested. And the day I was supposed to take my test, I got into a fight. And so they told me, but they ended up coming back and saying he's not mature enough to be in a class with older kids. So I lost out on that opportunity to skip a grade. So, you know, I was always good academically, but from a conduct standpoint, I was horrible.
Okay. So you told me that you went into the service. All right. So who was the guiding uh who was your guidance or your guiding light that helped you make that decision? Because I truly feel like that creates, structure, creates boundaries, creates, a whole number of different positive things, especially for, for youth, if you're, having trouble like this. Who helped you point you in that direction?
So, so one of my foster dads, who passed away back in 2005, he served in the military for 20 years. And he was always talking about his time in the military and how he enjoyed it. And he thought that, everyone should at least serve, 2 to 3 years in the military. Well, while I was in college at Fort Valley State, the ROTC program was doing one of their recruit weeks where they show off. They had like this rock climbing wall, and they had all these little activities so that the students could come and try them out. So I stopped, did the wall climb, talked to one of the military instructors, and then I ended up going to talk with the PMS, the professor of military science over there. And so we signed me up for one of the ROTC classes for the next semester. And then I did pretty well, and we just went from there. Now, I ended up commissioning later on graduation day later in 2014. So I credit my desire to join the military to my foster dad.
Yeah.
I credit, I want to credit my military service to him.
And then how would you say your time there in the military, how did that help you?
I think it sharpened my leadership skills. I felt like I was already somewhat developing as a leader. But the military opened my eyes from a cultural standpoint. I got to live in South Korea for a year. I got to see what that culture was like. I got to work alongside some of their military service members. In South Korea, every male is forced to serve 2 to 3 years in the military before they go and do their actual career. It doesn't matter if they're a college student or a cab driver, whatever the case may be. You're going to serve a minimum of 2 years in the military. So being able to be engulfed in their culture, get to try their food and things like that, and see how it's done in other countries, kind of broaden my horizons a bit. And then I got to work for some very great leaders, people who mentored me and invested time into me. So they saw my potential as a leader, and thought that I could go very far as a military officer. Unfortunately, my body got broke before I could, realize that potential. But I am extremely grateful for the time that I served, extremely grateful for the relationships I built, and extremely grateful for for the opportunities that the military gave me.
No, for sure. Anybody that serves our country does it in a very, selfless, way. It's truly serving, and people can't see or even truly understand. So, I definitely have, high respect for anybody that, goes on that path and chooses to, serve this country. So I just wanted to say thank you, for that. So you get out of the military. It sounds like you were injured. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a spinal surgery in 2021. I had disc replacement surgery,
Mm-hmm.
which was a very invasive surgery. And so if you can't run anymore, you can't pass your PT test.
Mm-hmm.
So I have what they call radiculopathy in both of my legs, which is basically shooting nerve pain that goes up and down your legs, in
Yeah.
addition to the um, chronic arthritis I have in my back.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
No,
labeled
more than helping you.
non-deployable.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So once you're non-deployable, um, they get you out of there fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go and find something else to do, and that's how I ended up becoming a DoD civilian for the Air Force.
Okay. So what are you doing now? You got some interesting stuff up your sleeve now, in what you're doing for work.
So I am an emergency management specialist for the Air Force here at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. So I'm part of a team here that oversees the overall emergency management for the installation. So we ensure that every unit here on the installation adheres to all the standards and protocols set forth by the Air Force when it comes to things like sheltering in place, um, active shooter protocols, severe weather, hazmat incidents, things like that, and making sure that personnel know what to do in the event that those incidents occurs on the installation.
Yeah, definitely a very important job in dealing with some highly, sensitive type of situations, but still keeping us, safe and making sure that, our military is fully equipped. So, off camera, we were talking a little bit about some real estate stuff that you got going on, that you own a couple properties now. Obviously that's my space, my wheelhouse. So you're able to not own just one home, but you have, two, I think you said two properties now.
Yeah, so I own the home that I'm currently living in, and then I own a rental property out in Kansas where I was last stationed at, and I was able to do that through my VA loan, which is a benefit um, that I have from my time in the military.
No, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It definitely comes in handy, and it sounds like you could continue to do that and have access to that. So I
Yeah,
would
yeah,
say
it's
definitely
definitely a gift that
take it
keeps on giving if you know how to do it
if you
correctly.
know how to do it. No, for sure, for sure. All right, so tell everybody a little bit about your book and kind of how that came about.
So, on my way out of the military, I felt like it was time for me to finally tell my story about, my experiences before, during, and after uh, my time in the foster care system. I wanted to write my story so that other foster youth could have something to look towards. I didn't want to write just a sad memoir about, oh, these bad things happened to me, the end. I wanted to write, hey, these things happened to me, but hey, I also accomplished these things here. You can do the same thing. The last, I would say, third of the book is some people call it a roadmap. I give it, guidance from my experience as a foster youth, ways that foster parents and foster youth themselves can contribute to their success transitioning out into adulthood. One of the things I remember growing up as a kid was I was a voracious reader. I could knock out a Harry Potter book in less than a week. That's so cool. What I never saw were books that were written for foster youth by foster youth. Now we're starting to see a lot of these, in bookstores and online, and you see them being advertised on podcasts like this, which is awesome. So I wanted to, add my story to the long list of books written by foster youth for foster youth. I want to. This is my gift to current foster youth. This is me telling you that, hey, no matter what amount of adversity you went through, that you can go do great things.
No, it's a really important message that they definitely need to hear, right? Because you could find yourself in a lane where it is a victim mentality that life owes you something, what if this and what if that, but this is what it is, and I have to run my race. This is something that I've told myself, because obviously my story starts in the third world, very, very different circumstances, right? This is my race, right? This is my story. I have to run with the facts that I got, and I got to calibrate and make sense of all of the different things that hurdles that have come, in my way. So I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with your mental health in having all of these experiences? How has that affected your mental health?
One, I go to the gym. I work out pretty frequently. I lift weights four times a week. I get up at 5 a.m. to get on the treadmill. So just being, physically fit,
active. Yep.
Yeah. Even with all my aches and pains, I wake up in pain and I go to bed in pain. Mm-hmm. I feel like working out and being in some type of physical, being physically fit takes a load off from the mental aspect.
It does.
Mm-hmm. Communicating with other foster youth, when you're working for and trying to help other foster youth, it takes the focus off of you. You're not you're not in your house throwing a little pity party.
Correct.
So I'm, as I mentioned before, I'm a CASA, and I'm a volunteer on the foster care review board. So I'm doing my best to, help make the foster care system better.
No, for sure.
I went to therapy as a young adult, and I feel like I was able to talk out those issues. And I have a great pair of mentors. One of the big things that I talk about in my book are my mentors. I met my mentors my freshman year of college, and any issues that I have, I go and I talk to them. They're a great sounding board. 17 years, almost 18 years later, we're still all in a group chat. I was literally with them this weekend, and spending some great quality time with them. So having someone that, can give you feedback, and can be a sounding board when you're going through things.
No, for sure. That's definitely 100% the case, right? You definitely need to have an outlet and have a sounding board to be able to, get this level of clarity. And that's something that, I've had to gain myself. It's taken me a very long time. Like most men, I struggle with isolation, right? I think that's kind of a normal thing, and I find myself slowly kind of sliding into isolation, not intentional, but this is somehow some of the times how guys choose to deal with certain things. Not even a choice. They may not even be aware of this pattern sometimes, right?
I
So
think naturally men are just, we choose to hold stuff in,
mhm,
and that's why we die at such a younger age than our
correct.
female counterparts.
Hmm.
We take stuff to the grave with us.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And this is creating an opportunity for us not to do that, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and communicate through some of these, heavier, challenging, things, and at the end, it makes you feel, more human, right? So one of the questions that we always end with is lessons learned, right? I tell my kids, you're winning or you're learning, but you're never losing, right? And that's just a mindset thing that we have in our house. So I wanted to ask you, what is your best lessons learned from life and in business?
Um, I think um, that's one of my best lessons learned. Um, I would say don't rush the process. Um, most of your goals, um, that you set in life, they're a process. Um, don't rush them because you'll make mistakes and you'll jeopardize those goals. So what I try to do is I set, my big goals, and then in order to reach those big goals, I have like mini goals, or uh, uh, little check marks on my way to that goal. And so uh, they keep me on pace to make those goals. Um, and it keeps me steady. It keeps me at a consistent pace, and it keeps me from rushing. I feel like um, we're in a society where we're so quick to rush to success, where we don't enjoy the journey, because the journey is where we learn. That's where we do all the learning. You don't learn anything once you get to success.
No,
You
no, no,
learn
no.
during the journey to
Correct,
success.
correct, correct, correct.
So, having patience and just enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
Because like you asked me earlier, would I have ever seen myself at, if I would have asked my 15, 16-year-old version, if I saw myself being here right now, and I would have told you no. But because, through maturity, through establishing relationships, through, withstanding adversity and continuing to push forward, I was able to get to this point.
No, for sure. I think your story is definitely inspiring, eye opening, and creates a sense of awareness for challenges that happen behind closed doors. right? And that's one of the missions that, I am on as a foster parent. I know the things that I was missing. I know the things that I longed for. I know the things that I saw that I had no business seeing. It's you take a culmination of all of those things and you create, the parent system, the family life and stuff like that you hoped you dwelled in. you know so I hope that in the future you're able to create your own family through the lessons that you've learned. And similar to a point that you made, is you connect the dots looking backwards, not forward. So enjoy the journey and don't rush it. So although that's easier said than done.
Yeah, it's definitely much easier said
Yeah.
than done, but
Uh-huh.
you just gotta trust the people around you, trust your support system, and things will figure themselves out as long as you're willing to put in the work and you have the discipline and the commitment.
No, for sure. So where can they find your book?
So they can find my book on Amazon, Books A Million, or Barnes and Nobles, and anywhere that you can buy books online.
Okay. All right. I'll drop the link for Tristan's book in the comments. And I just want to tell you, thank you for coming on here. Thank you for blessing us. Thank you for breaking bread together, so to speak, during for a bigger cause, right? Which is foster care. So thank you guys for joining us with the Pro Design Builder. It's not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design.